time. You use thousands of words to describe an entity only to conclude that it is, in the end, indescribable. Why this place?
The dilapidated 17th century tombstones. Midnight on Winter's Eve. The asylum. Could you feel that? How do you describe that feeling? I would say it is unnameable.
Christ, Carter, not this again.
You see that giant willow yonder? Whose trunk has nearly engulfed an ancient, illegible slab. It is fantastically spectral. The unmentionable nourishment that its colossal roots must be sucking from that hoary, charnel earth.
Yes, but you're describing to me, aren't you? You're using words, and therefore that tree is clearly not unnameable. Come on, Carter, if you want to go on a metaphysical rant for 5 pages, be my guest. But that kind of writing does not sell units. People don't want to read that.
Oh my gosh, okay.
And as for that tree, no interments have occurred there for over a century. Nothing could possibly exist to nourish it in anything but an ordinary manner. Besides, all your talk of unnameable and unmentionable things is nothing more than a very puerile device quite in keeping with your lowly standing as an author. You are too fond of ending your stories with sights and sounds that paralyze your heroes' faculties and leave them without words or courage to describe what it is that they have seen. No one can relate to that. We know things, we experience things through our 5 senses. Therefore, it is quite impossible to refer to anything that cannot be depicted by the solid definition of fact.
Well, they say there's no such thing as a bad student. Only a bad teacher.
Don't go there.
You are a testament to that. Okay, don't misunderstand me. You taught me a lot all those years ago. But your problem was that you never wanted me to break from your style. You wanted me to create your work, to replicate your ideas, verbatim. I can't do that, Nanton. I'm a better writer than you ever were. That is why I am the author. And you, my friend, are the critic.
Your work is normal and functional. It just does not possess any aesthetic significance, and that is the province of the artist. Not so much to rouse strong emotion through action and ecstasy, as to maintain a placid interest in everyday affairs.
Okay, fine, but when something cannot be explained...
And it cannot be explained. Why attempt to?
Okay. You believe in the supernatural. I do not.
I know you don't, but that is not relevant.
No, it is, because you need to accept the fact that the normal form of language cannot possibly describe intricacies of that which does not exist. It can be described, yes, but not without subjective input.
The mind can find its greatest pleasures in escape from the daily treadmill and in recombination of images thrown into patterns of everyday existence.
Okay, thrown in habitually by fatigue. The patterns you describe are hackneyed and uninspired.
Give me something virtually incredible to a clear, practical, logical intellect. All things have fixed dimensions and properties, causes and effects. Of course, the mind sometimes holds on to visions of a less classifiable nature.
So, you believe yourself justified in drawing an arbitrary line and ruling out of court all which cannot be experienced or understood by the average citizen?
Not at all. I'm just saying that these things can be easily put into words and are therefore not unnameable.
I well realize the futility of imaginative and metaphysical arguments against the complacency of an orthodox sun-dweller. These crumbling slate slabs, the patriarchal trees, the century gambrel roofs of the witch-haunted old town that stretches around us, all combined to rouse my spirit in defense of my work. You are just too simple to understand it. You read the story.
Of course.
Okay, then you remember the appearance of dying persons at distant places. Yes? And of old faces in windows through which they gazed all their lives. As a supernaturalist, you must credit these whisperings of rural grandmothers. You have an instinctual faith in the existence of spectral substances on this earth, apart from and subsequent to their material counterparts. A capability to believe in phenomena beyond all normal notions. For if a dead man can transmit his visible and tangible image halfway across the world or down the stretch of centuries, why is it absurd to imagine that deserted houses are full of queer and sentient things, or that old graveyards teem with the terrible, unbodied intelligence of generations? And since spirits, in order to cause all the manifestations attributed to them, cannot be limited by the laws of matter, why? Why is it extravagant to imagine psychically living dead things in shapes, or moreover, absences of shapes, which for the human spectator must be utterly and appallingly unnameable?
I believe these things exist, but expressions equally as strange and majestic exist also. It's just not sensible.
Not sensible?
You should use some common sense.
Common sense.
Common sense.
Reflecting on these subjects, I assure you, in menial terms, is merely the stupid absence of mental flexibility and imagination.
You are not as impressive as you think you are. You have done nothing to refute the argument that your stories lack physical detail. I'm confident in my opinions.
Well, that makes you a good teacher. It doesn't make you right. I am so sure of mine that I don't fear defeat. This tombstone is surprisingly comfortable. Right?
I don't mind it.
So you really didn't like the story?
The attic window. It wasn't your worst work. What perplexes me is you claim to have done a world of research, and yet your story is void of all details.
So you had it removed from the stands?
That wasn't my intention.
The thing is, it is a story impossible to tell in simple terms to begin with. It arose from another one of those crazy country mutterings that Cotton Mather had been gullible enough to dump into that chaotic Magnalia Christi Americana. And so poorly authenticated that even he had not ventured to name the locality where it occurred. I had to work to find the true source of that story. As to the way I amplified the bed jotting of the madman, it could not be done the way you are suggesting. The language has to be characteristic of a flighty and notional scribbler. Cotton Mather had indeed told of the thing as being born. But no one but a cheap sensationalist would ever think of having it grow up and look into people's windows at night, or be hidden in an attic, in flesh and in spirit. Until one day, someone saw it centuries later and could not describe what it was that turned his hair grey.
But you named the creature. You named it Unnamable. It's all flagrant and trashy.
I found the diary of the young boy who lived in the house. An old diary kept between 1706 and 1723. The diary is real. So were the scars on the victims. The Unnamable is real.
I don't doubt that. I just doubt that it is unnameable.
No one in the region can name it. There have been whispers for generations. There was an unimaginable madness that gripped the boy who entered the abandoned house. It was an eldritch thing. It's no wonder sensitive students shudder at the Puritan age of Massachusetts. So little is known of what went on beneath the surface. So little, yet such a ghastly festering as it bubbles up putrescently in occasional ghoulish glimpses. The witchcraft terror is a horrible ray of light into what was stewing in men's crushed brains. But even that is trifle. There is no beauty, no freedom. You can see that from the architectural and household remains and the poisonous sermons of the cramped divines. And inside that rusted iron straitjacket lurked a gibbering hideousness, a perversion, a diabolism. He truly is the apotheosis of the Unnamable. Cotton Mather, in that demonic sixth book that no one should read after dark. He minced no words as he flung forth his anathema. Stern as a Jewish prophet, but laconically unamazed as none since his time could be. He told of the thing which brought forth what was more than beast, but less than man. The thing with the blemished eye, and the screaming drunken wretch that hanged for having such an eye. This much he boldly told, yet without a hint of what came after. Perhaps he did not know. Or perhaps he knew, but did not dare tell. Others knew and did not dare tell. There is no public hint of why they whispered about the lock on the door to the attic stairs in the house of a broken, childless, embittered old man. Put up a blank slate slab by an avoided grave. Though there are enough evasive legends to curdle the thinnest blood. It is all in that ancestral diary that I found. All the hushed innuendos and the furtive tales of things with a blemished eye seen at windows in the night or in the deserted meadow by the woods. Something had gripped hold of that boy on a dark valley road, leaving him with marks of horns on his chest and ape-like claws on his back. And when they looked for prints in the trampled dust, they found the mixed markings of split hooves and vaguely anthropoid paws. Once a post rider said he saw an old man chasing and calling to a frightful, loping, nameless thing up on Meadow Hill in the thinly moonlit hours before dawn. And many believed him. Certainly there was strange talk one night in 1710 when that childless old man was buried in the crypt behind his house, in sight of that blank slate slab. They never unlocked that attic door, but the whole house as it was, dreaded and deserted. When noises came from it, they whispered and shivered and hoped to God that the lock on the attic door was strong. And then they stopped hoping. When the horror occurred at the parsonage, leaving not a soul alive or in one piece. with the years, the legends take on a spectral character. I suppose the thing, if it were a living thing, must be dead. But the horror has lived on, and the memory just lingers on hideously. All the more hideous because it was so secret.
Perhaps I went a little too far. I do believe you have the ability to tell these stories. Tell them as you have just told me. Use the facts, not the intangible sensations. Did the boy from the story survive?
The boy was a pure work of fiction. But the house was not. And since you believe that windows retain latent images of those who sat at them, and that boy could be any person who has looked at that window and come back screaming maniacally.
Boy, window, scream, diary. These are all nameable things. You have yet to provide me.
The thing in the attic. That thing has no name.
If that is so, it's only because no man has given it one. I believe it existed, I do. Some unnatural monster that really existed, but even the most morbid perversion of nature need not be unnameable or scientifically indescribable.
I admire your clearness and persistence. The later spectral legends relate to monstrous apparitions, more frightful than anything organic could be. Apparitions of gigantic bestial forms, sometimes visible and sometimes only tangible, which float about on moonless nights and haunt the deserted house and the old grave where a sapling had sprouted beside an ancient illegible slab. Whether or not such apparitions have ever gored or smothered a person to death, as told by uncorroborated traditions, they had produced a strong and consistent impression, and we are darkly feared by very aged natives, though largely forgotten by the last two generations, perhaps dying for lack of being thought of. Moreover, as far as aesthetic theory is involved, if the psychic emanations of human creatures be grotesque distortions, then what coherent representation could express or portray so gibbous and infamous a nebulosity as a spectre of a malign, chaotic perversion?